Hi, this is Dr. Ray Nannis with Optimum Wellness Solutions. Today we're going to be continuing our discussion of the Owner's Manual for the Human Body. Today we're going to be talking about exercise. You know, I have people tell me all the time when we start to mention exercise, I walk all day long at work, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. They have an active job versus some of the people that obviously have a more sedentary job. And I let them know that, there's a difference between exercise and work. If you're doing it at work, unless your job just requires miles and miles and miles during the day, let's call that work. Exercise is something else that we're doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I would much rather you have a more active job, a more movable job where you're moving around on a day-by-day basis, but so many people spend their days sitting behind a computer. The interesting thing is I have had several patients in the last year come to me and say, is it possible for me to get a standing desk? Because they've read some of the research on how damaging it is for us to sit. So we've had a lot of people that were actually moving to standing desks, and they're noticing that they're more productive, that they feel better at the end of the day. There's a little bit of a transition time where they'll feel a little sore because they were used to not standing, but we get over that relatively quickly, and by the end of the day, they're feeling better. Today we're going to be talking about exercise. Exercise is vital. It's so important that we move our bodies because, again, we're living in such a way that our nervous systems, our bodies, are not being moved. We were developed, as our body developed, it was developed so that we moved. Our ancestors, again, Paleolithic ancestors, if you listen to anything I say, I'm always thinking about it from that perspective. What did our Paleolithic ancestors do? They woke up in the morning and they walked, or they ran, but they moved to be able to get berries and fruits and nuts, or to hunt, or whatever it was that they did. That's what they did for a living. Their living was indeed living, trying to stay alive. What's our living today? So many people are sitting behind the computer just typing away all day. Obviously, there's a lot of people that work on some kind of a conveyor belt. They're working on some kind of assembly or whatever it may be. But most of our jobs don't require a lot of motion, so we have to do something to allow motion into life. I will say that the most important single exercise that we can do is to walk. Why? Because neurologically we grew up, we developed from humans that walked. That's what they did. Our nervous systems are wired to heal during walking. Walking puts us into that parasympathetic rest digest system. That's what it does. Even fast walking, and it may increase the heart rate a little bit, but we need to walk. It doesn't have to be a whole lot. When I accept anybody as a patient, I ask for two things. Number one, drink a lot of water. Iced tea, Coca-Cola, and coffee are not water. We need water because every single cell in our body is made out of water. We've talked about that already. But we also ask people to walk. And what I mean by that is go out the front door, turn right, walk 5 minutes down the road, turn around and come back. At least 10 minutes. That's all we need. A little more is better, but we need to do something, because how many people could spend their entire day and their only walk is back and forth to the car? We wake up in the morning, we sit down and we have breakfast. We get up out of breakfast, we walk to our car and we sit in our car and drive to work. Then we sit at work for 8 hours sometimes, barely moving a muscle. We sit in our car, drive home, walk from the car to the house, have dinner, sit for dinner, and then sit in front of the TV all night long until we pass out. And we wonder why we have no energy. It's an interesting thing the way the body works. The more we move, the more energy our body creates. The less we move, the less energy our body creates. And again, if we look at this from a Paleolithic perspective, it starts to make sense. If there were times where there was a lot of confinement, the worst thing that we could do is have tribes of people with lots of energy, because they would probably kill each other. There would be fights. They needed to be sedentary. So if you think about maybe times when we lived in caves or small huts, at times when the weather was non-permissive for people to be outside, it was necessary for them to feel a little bit sluggish and a little bit run down and maybe not move around so much. But the vast majority of the time, they needed to be out and have energy, and in fact have as much energy as possible so that they could gather food, they could do the things that they needed to do. So one of the most important components of any exercise program is simply putting some walking in. Now I'm going to say that alone is not going to fix everything, because there are at least 3 major components to exercise. The first one is doing something cardiovascular. Now when I bring up cardiovascular, most people think about the treadmill or the exercise bike or something along that lines, where they have to be on it for 30 to 45 minutes, 3, 4, 5 times per week to get any significant benefit. I'm going to say that most of what we think about when we think about health is wrong. And I'm going to say that type of exercise is not really what we're designed to do. Now, if you can't get out and walk, at least get on a treadmill. That's better than doing nothing. But as far as the cardiovascular benefit, that's not the major benefit of walking. The major benefit of walking is neurological. If we want to develop the cardiovascular system, we have to do something called burst exercises. There's a bunch of names for this, but what a burst exercise is a close to maximum intensity exercise. We're talking 95% or so of your cardiovascular function for 1 minute. And you only need to do this about 12 minutes a week. So when I'm talking about cardiovascular exercise, the thing that I'm asking for is 12 minutes a week. And if you can't devote 12 minutes a week to your health, then there's not much that anyone's going to be able to do for you. You don't even need to break a sweat. Again, what is a burst exercise? A burst exercise is maximum intensity. And I'm going to say that everybody on the planet has the ability to do a burst exercise. Everybody's ability may be a little bit different. I have some patients that literally just sitting down and standing up, they're going to get to that 95% of cardio capacity. I have other patients I need to put a 100-pound backpack on their back and make them run bleachers for a minute because their cardiac ability is better. We're all somewhere in between that. So what are we supposed to do? What we need to do is do any activity. I don't care whether it's a blurpee where you're jumping up and down, doing jumping jacks, running in place if that does it for you. There's some equipment if you're interested. It's called Exciser. It's one of my favorite things. It's a stair stepper where there's no resistance, but you can go maximum intensity. How do you know that you've reached the goal? Number one, it would be a challenge for you to keep the intensity for any longer than about 60 to 90 seconds. If you can go longer than 60 to 90 seconds, you are no longer, if you can go longer than 60 to 90 seconds, you are no longer at a maximum intensity. Now you may be able to back off a little bit and keep going longer, but we want the maximum intensity for 1 minute. That's really what we're trying to accomplish. This gets the glycogen out of the muscle, it gets the glycogen out of the liver, and it burns off the ATP that's stored, that's adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy that our cells use on an instant. It gives us a burst of initial energy, and we want to use that up because this starts to put our body into a fat-burning, cardiovascular efficient system. How do you know that you've gotten there? If you get done with the exercise and you can't say more than 1 to 2 words without having to take a deep breath. If you can have a conversation like I am right this moment, obviously you've not reached that maximum cardiac intensity. If you can say if you can say more than maybe 3 to 4 words, you have to work a little bit harder. I'm not asking for more time, I'm asking for more intensity. Maximum intensity for 60 seconds. Then what do? You stop. You go do whatever it is that you want to do. There's 2 ways that we could do this. The way that I do it, when I walk into the door of my office, I do my burst exercise. We have a little exercise machine at the back. I mentioned it already, called the Exciser. It's Xiser.com. Maximum intensity, you do it for a minute, and then I go do paperwork. I do whatever it is that I need to do. Just before lunch, I do another minute, and then I go do lunch, whatever it may be. When I come back from lunch, I do another minute, and then we start to see patients again. And then just before I leave for the day, I do another minute. That's 4 times. I need to do that 3 days a week. My goal is 12 minutes a week. I work really hard to make sure that that happens. The other way that you could do it is do a minute, then let the body calm down, which should take 2 to 3 minutes of calming down, and then do another minute. Then let the body calm down and do that again. It should take somewhere between 2 to 4 minutes for you to be able to take that deep breath again. That's when you would be able to do it again. In other words, what we're trying to do is we're trying to spike that cardiovascular activity. That's the goal. What does this do for you? Number one, it makes the body incredibly cardiovascular efficient. Number two, it makes the body hormone sensitive. It actually helps to develop and grow growth hormone to where the body will produce growth hormone. Growth hormone is the youth hormone. The more growth hormone that we have, the more likelihood of us staying youthful. Very, very important. Hormone sensitivity we'll talk about on another video because we have a whole video dedicated to that coming up. Because the more sensitive our hormones, the more sensitive our cells are to the hormones, the higher efficiency our bodies are going to work. I want you to take a couple of moments and review, and I'm sure we'll have some slides that will show some people running a marathon. Look at the people running a marathon. Most of them are very, very thin, but if they're training for long distances, if that's what they do, they're doing this long time running, they're doing lots and lots of running, and that's all they do, look at their bodies. Most of the time, although they be very thin, they're flimsy, their body is flabby. But look at the decathletes, the people that are doing track and field, where we're doing 100-yard dashes, we're doing 200-yard dashes, we're doing hurdles, we're doing javelins, we're doing shot puts. Look at the people's muscles. They're big, strong muscles because most of what they're doing is that burst exercise. You actually have a better cardiovascular advantage with the burst exercise than some of those people that can run very, very long distances. In addition to that, we save the glands. All of the things like adrenal glands, thyroid gland, thymus, you name it. All of them function better with the burst exercises. That's the first type of exercise, something cardiovascular. The next type of exercise is we want to do some form of resistance exercise. We have to do something to move the muscles. If we don't do resistance, the muscles work on a move it or lose it cycle. If any of you have ever been put in a cast, when I was, I want to say second grade, about 8 years old, I broke my arm. I was playing football with kids that were way bigger than me and decided that at being a smaller person, that maybe football was not my best choice in life. But I broke my arm right here, so they put my body in a cast. I was in a cast for 6 weeks, and when I got out, I literally could not move my arm because they took the cast off and I figured I'd be able to straighten my arm out. What I found out was it took about 4 more weeks to be able to get that full range of motion back, and literally within 6 weeks, the muscles wasted away, even at only 8 years old, which you would think when you're pretty young, you'd be able to heal relatively quickly. If any of you have ever been in a cast, you've probably experienced a similar thing, that it takes some time to rehab, to recuperate just back to where you are. The muscles work on a use it or lose it system. If the body is getting flimsy, flabby, what have you, it's because we're not utilizing or moving the muscles. Some people do have jobs where you use muscles on a regular basis, but for the vast majority of people where we're sitting behind desks, we're not moving our body. Again, we don't need a huge amount of time. 10 or 15 minutes, 3 times per week. Again, we could exercise almost every muscle in the body. On a future video, I'm going to show you what I do on a regular basis with light weights, but quite a few reps, just to kind of keep the muscles toned. I'm not looking to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or any of the major muscle builders, but I want to make sure that the body stays toned, because the more efficient, the stronger those muscles are, again, it lets your body utilize hormones better. It's going to make the body more efficient, and it burns fat because muscle burns fat. The third type of exercise is one of my favorites, and I would like at some point in the future as well to possibly get an expert on this to come as a guest for one of our videos here, but it's yoga. It's stretching exercises. It doesn't have to be yoga. There's a lot of other things, but I think yoga is probably one of the best ones, because yoga is really about centering the mind, the spirit, the body, balancing all of those, having that connection within. We talk in yoga about breathing. Breathing is the most important part of yoga. Any of the yoga teachers I've ever had always are talking about how important it is to breathe. We've talked about that in a previous video. We're utilizing our body as its own resistance force. So we're getting that muscle work that we're doing. And obviously there's the stretching and limbering component. The more limber and flexible the body is, the less likely you are to have physical traumas when there are accidents. So again, to recap, there's three main types of exercise, and we need to figure out how to do a little bit of them all within our life. Number one, there's cardiovascular, but again, we're only asking for about 12 minutes, 12 minutes a week total. There's some form of resistance exercises, maybe 10 minutes, 3 times per week, maybe 15 if you really want to go crazy with it. And then there's some form of stretching exercises, and we can do some simple stretching exercises. On one of the next videos, I'm going to actually demonstrate some of the stretching exercises. Or we could go to kind of the epitome, which gets a little bit of them all, which is like a yoga or a Pilates, one of those type of things. So we're getting physical, we're getting the physical cardiovascular, we're getting the muscle activity, and we are getting the flexibility. The more flexible the body is, the more that it moves, the more that it supplies the brain. And that's really what this whole thing about, is making sure that our brain stays healthy. This has been Dr. Ray Nanus with Optimum Wellness Solution, providing you your optimum wellness solution.
The greatest calamity that could befall early man was the loss of fire. Fire, the mysterious phenomenon that cooked his food, heated his cave, and kept him alive. If he could not start a fire, he and his would surely die. Even in early man, the need to laugh was vital for emotional survival.